Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update, 190 for Monday, 14th of July, 2025. Hope you're all well. Hope you've had a good weekend. I hope you're enjoying a good start to the week. As always, if you're here in the room or if you're watching us on YouTube, it'd be great to know if you can just confirm that you can hear my voice and you can see the slides, that the technology is working in our favour. And whilst you do that, for those of you joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can squeeze in the next 25, 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within FX indices and commodities markets, looking at a couple of charts of interest of stocks and ETFs that might be of relevance to you, and then a look at the live market itself. It's not a signal service, not a trade recommendation. It's just me, as I say, just sharing what I'm looking at, and hopefully that might well be of interest or use to yourselves. As always, you're very welcome here. Just remember that you're always responsible for your own trading decisions. For those of you who want a little bit of help or support or a little bit more education, I do a once a year session, and that will be next Monday, 21st of July, 6:30 on a intraday training session, okay, from 6:30 London time, just looking at intraday trading US indices. If you want to code there, or there's a QR code there, or just ping me if you want some more information. And as always, I will be doing a few more webinars this week. Okay, the first one will be the Active Trades Monday Market Matters webinar, 2:00 London time today. I'll be looking at managing trader motivation as the education element. You're welcome to join. You can do so either on the website or through that bit.ly code or QR code rather there. And I'll be delivering the Wednesday evening Market Pulse weekly update for Admiral Markets this week. Okay, once again, you can use the QR code or the bit.ly code if you want to join there, looking at global markets, US dollar, sterling, and UK stocks. All right, let's dig into the main element of what we want to talk about here today. So this is the STAM, or rather its elements of my weekend model that I do every weekend, where I'm looking to identify where's the strength and where's the weakness from FX indices and commodities markets. I appreciate if you're new to trading, or if this is if you're new to joining us, it might maybe look a little bit overwhelming or intimidating, but it's not that difficult to understand once you've seen it a couple of times. What's it telling us, and where are we? Well, here we are. We are into week 29 of the year, 14th of July. Where's the strength and where's the weakness? Any major changes? Well, at the top of the pile, we still have Swiss franc, okay, as number one, as it has been for a good part of pretty much the last sort of 3-4 months. Joined with it is the euro, okay. So you've got Swiss franc and euro at the top of the pile. At the very bottom of the pile, okay, we've had Japanese yen has now sort of fallen to 8th place, bottom of the pile. Kind of those of you who joined me for the VTP Stage 2 calls, was talking about what really lovely daily trends there have been on some of the Japanese yen pairs, okay, as Japanese yen has got battered. The dollar's had let's say it's just had a week of firmness, all right, that as you well know, one swallow doesn't make a summer, but we've seen a little bit of an element of that, and this is going to be an interesting week, I think, for sort of seeing getting a bit more insight into sort of FX markets and indices and commodities as well. Invariably, we've seen Trump sending out his letters and talking about his tariffs, as always. Nothing really new there. But of course, the EU is looking at its response along with Mexico and a few others. And so I expect that we will get some media tit for tats, and invariably that will have sort of volatility spikes in markets. So naturally, you want to be on top of your game there. What we've also seen is Aussie dollar. Okay, Aussie dollar, which has been for most of the sort of kind of this year has been hovering down the sort of bottom half of the stam. That's actually sort of crawling its way up into the top half. It's fourth there. We can actually also see for the start of this week so far since we've opened, Aussie, Kiwi, CAD, Condols have been top of the pile there. All right, giving us a bit of an indication of kind of risk on mentality. We'll have a quick look at Aussie dollar later. It's also off the back of some the sort of Chinese data has been a little bit better than expected. And you can see CAD is now in third, right? Kiwi is sort of kind of hovering around there. So those condols, are kind of nudging their way a bit higher. And that's a little bit of an indication of perhaps some risk on mentality. Close to home, how's sterling doing? Well, it shouldn't really come as too much of a shock that we have seen sterling starting to slip, and we're now 5 from 8 here, having been top just a couple of months ago. Those of you who've joined me said a basis of an anti-dollar, anti-Trump trade, and at some point those kind of those pigeons will come home to roost, and that's what we're starting to experience there. We've got a bit of UK data this week, in what is a bit of a full-on data. We've got UK CPI on Wednesday morning. We've got jobs numbers on Thursday, and we also have Rachel Reeves giving her Mansion House speech this week. People will be keen to see what that is, and also Mr. Bailey from the Bank of England. He's speaking tomorrow. So there's a fair bit of information. There's a fair bit of UK data coming out. There's a fair bit of US data. Of course, we've got like CPI tomorrow, and then PPI on Wednesday, and then retail sales on Thursday. We're also into kind of earnings season. We've got quite a sort of slew of earnings coming out this week. Okay, but we'll look at that more in a moment when we switch to the charts of interest. Interestingly, what has been kind of curious is that even though we've seen some of those American indices hitting all-time highs, in terms of their momentum, that is quite interesting to me. In that basically, that's the supporting momentum has just basically it's ebbed right at the highs there. Okay, does that mean that we've hit all-time highs and we can't go any further? No, of course it doesn't. All right, you're always looking at the price action. We will do that in a moment, but it is quite curious to me that has occurred like that invariably is just it's almost like the tide's gone out there now. Listen, it's mid-July. All right, it could literally be mid-July. We're into that summer thing, and everyone has just got so fed up over all the tariff shenanigans. Everyone's a bit burnt out. Everyone's a bit fed up. Everyone's like ready for their summer holidays. Everybody's ready to just say, listen, come on, let's just go away for a few weeks, let it all settle, and we'll come back and sort this out in September. So, we'll see whether that actually plays out. But yeah, that is something that I noted from my analysis. Strategic buy. Price action is a bit interesting. Silver strategic buy has been, but is also showing us that the price action there has been rallying its way. VIX is bullish. All right, Bitcoin isn't in a stam environment, but it is most definitely bullish, which we're about to have a look at in a moment ourselves. So plenty going on. It is going to be a busy week. So as always, you want to keep on top of your risk management and keep on top of understanding the order flow and understanding, let's say the geopolitical and domestic political flow as well, because there's going to be lots to give us some volatility in markets this week. Okay, so let's have a look at charts of interest. What have we got here? Okay, so as I said, there's quite a few of the finance firms and a whole host of others that have got their earnings reports this week, and one of them is Netflix. They're after the close on Thursday. So we always have a quick look at some of these charts of interest. Netflix, this is the weekly chart. Okay, my charts are very simple. I've got fractals on there, a blue 20 period, a red 50, a green 200 simple period moving averages, and then drawing in big significant levels. And listen, that's been quite some trend, hasn't it? That has been quite some trend for a couple of years. Interestingly, they got hammered after they sort of came out harder on people sharing their sharing basically their Netflix entry codes and their Netflix memberships, and came out on hard on that, and people thought that it would be the end of them. But if anything, looking at that chart, it has not been that was worked. That kind of strategy worked, and you can see that has just been in a beautiful trend. Okay, bouncing off the 50 and the 20. Okay, a little bit of that was the whole world crazy. But that being in a big strong uptrend. And as I say to new traders and investors, all right, good trends leap out of the chart at you, all right. When they do, don't fight them, okay? Just try and find a way to surf them. Now, that has been a continued great trend. All right, the last couple of weeks have maybe taken off a little bit of the nudge, but that's no surprise, all right? Maybe a bit of profit taking in front of the news, in front of their earnings. The only thing I would have of note is that, I like basically good trends that are respecting that 20-period moving average. And what we're starting to see there is that price was starting to pull away from those averages. Those averages are widening, and once price goes parabolic, gravity tends to take hold at some point. So I'll be on my watch list. I'll be interested to see how that responds at the end of this week to those earnings data. As I said, one of the others we've got here is JP Morgan Chase. They've got earnings before the open tomorrow, and there's a whole slew of kind of banking, major US banking. So there's JP Morgan, there's I think Citi, Wells Fargo, BlackRock tomorrow. And then Bank of America and Goldman Sachs tomorrow on Wednesday, and a few others in there. But the kind of thing that's of interest to me is, once again, this was a good solid trend. We had those kind of shenanigans, and the fascinating thing is that despite all that shenanigans, despite all that tariff talk, we have still continued to basically recover and actually push to new highs. That is not to be sniffed at. All right, that is not to be sniffed at. People might go on about the end of the American economy, etc., and what have you, but so long as stocks and big stocks like these are, keep heading to new all-time highs, as I said, you wouldn't want to be fighting it. Okay, once again, it has pulled away from its bit. Okay, so I will be interested to see whether the earnings for both JPM, but all of those kind of XLF boys, all right, the banking guys, how they're doing. Because if we are to continue, well, you need banks to be doing well to make sure that it is a continuing trend. So as I said, there'll be a lot of them out this week, and they will have an impact not only on the finance sector but the overall markets in terms of people looking at the confidence and sentiment they might have in banks and how they're displaying that. As I said, there's an awful lot of the banks coming out. A lot of them, their charts were pretty similar. All right, the charts were pretty similar, but the one that kind of was of interest to me was BAC. Okay, Bank of America. Once again, weekly chart. You can see that we double topped nicely. Okay, double topped, fell away, and have climbed back to those highs. But as I said, the others were a bit like JP Morgan, just in a nice, sort of kind of steady uptrend. Bank of America has been a little bit more volatile, certainly sort of deeper pullbacks. This double top here and then a strong pullback. And then we've pushed to highs. But if I look at that price action there, okay, whereas the others, all the other banks, they're pretty still solid. What we saw last week was Bank of America kind of come back and close, all right, close beneath the low of the previous week, close beneath the highs of these double tops, all right. It was getting up to sort of tickling the soft underbelly of $50, but it's pulled back from that, okay, and you're looking at that in the pre-market, 46.72. As I said, these guys, their earnings are on Wednesday, so I will be curious to see how their earnings are compared to everyone else's. The other banks, their price action was pretty still bullish. These were the only guys who had like basically a note of caution in terms of the price action there. So this will be one that'll be on my watch list to see how this plays out on Wednesdays. Finally, before we switch to the live charts, we'll have a little look at Bitcoin here. So I've got two charts here. So I have this is a monthly chart. This is the weekly chart. Okay. So firstly, with the monthly, I was already kind of looking to be long Bitcoin here. Okay, my TMM monthly move session gave me a signal. Okay, at the start of this month, based upon last month's price action. So I was already looking to be bullish on that. Okay, and then those of you who joined us last week, I've been talking for a while. If we switch to the weekly chart, I've been talking for a while that 100K was kind of that line in the sand, namely. I had to see price stay above it for it to give me any confidence that it had legs. If it was to fail, and it could have because we were getting lower highs here. If 100k broke, I thought we'd be down to 90, but we didn't. And once again, we printed a bullish inside bar. And then last week, okay, that's what I said for those of you joining here last week, that what we had here was this is it's what I would call a bullish momentum pin bar. Okay, it's with the trend, but importantly, what I said last week was this was the highest weekly close in Bitcoin forever. Okay, this was an all-time Bitcoin weekly close, and after my monthly signal and after the sort of bounce off 100k and after this kind of really bullish weekly close, that's what I said last week was that I thought that that is not bearish, that is a bullish signal. um but even I was not expecting it to move as strong as it has done there. Okay, from where we were, closing about 109, trading up towards north of 122 this morning. Okay, probably even a little bit higher. I didn't expect that move to be as strong. Now I'm sure there'll be lots of people who said, yeah, they knew that was coming all along, and well, all right, you trade what I see in front of me, but that is bullish and is probably also another indication that the kind of risk-on sentiment, regardless of all the tariff stuff that's going on, that kind of risk-on sentiment is we are back in risk-on world. Okay, so it's just another confirmation of that. And if you look across pretty much most of those cryptocurrencies, and there are people far more expert and better than me at them. I'm just a trader who looks at charts and trades what I see. There is bullishness breaking out across the board. Okay, and clearly Bitcoin is the leader on that. And as I say, once again, once you're into a good trend, you don't want to fight it. You just want to look at it. Is there a way that I can possibly surf it? And that's what you should be looking to do with those at the moment. Okay, so there you go. We've looked at some charts of interest there. Let's switch across to the live markets and see what's been going on there. So just bear with me for a moment, and we'll switch across. So as I said, just bear a second. Let's let's go. Right. No, we don't want that. Okay, so I'm hoping that you can still hear me, hoping that you can see me now. We have got, or what have I brought up here? This is my usual sort of indices profile. So I've got Dow on the weekly, NASDAQ on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly, Russell on the weekly, FTSE on the weekly, Nikkei on the weekly, DAX on the weekly, and oil. Okay, oil has punched its way up a little bit. Okay, but really, after those kind of let's say Middle East geopolitical tension moves, it's not been exciting the last couple of weeks in terms of that too much. But interestingly, as I said, is that we have had, let's have a look at NASDAQ, over the last couple of weeks has effectively sort of moved its way to sort of above its new highs, closing in the weekly. Last couple of weeks, I wouldn't exactly say then I wouldn't exactly say they're punching. I'd say there's a little bit of almost like a breather, which for me means that what I want to see when I see price like that is come back, retest the previous highs, and then does it turn it from resistance into support? In which case, that to me would be enormously bullish. And as I said, we have there's a fair bit of earnings starting to come out this week. If I look at the daily chart, there's nothing, I don't see anything terribly exciting there over the last 2 weeks, other than we are at those highs. As I said, maybe back to the daily 20 there, and does it turn that into support for a move higher? Certainly, SP 500. Okay, on the weekly chart, doing pretty much the same. It's just some people might say, well, actually, Paul, is that actually not a bit of a double top? Yeah, but I wouldn't be just going short just because of that. Because there's literally so much strength across all of the indices, right? Not just the American ones, the global ones. So, yeah, I'll watch it, but I'd be looking at that kind of level. That's what I'd be looking at, saying, well, all right, I'm not even interested in anything until we start to break that, and even then, it's a case of do we come down and does the 20 once again act as support, which it has done here? If you look at the last couple of months, the blue 20s acted as support. Does it come down, act as support before it launches itself higher? That's, it's going to be an interesting week. All right, it's going to be an interesting week. So keep your powder dry for the best opportunities. Probably what is of interest for those of us a little bit closer to home, UK FTSE has finally decided to put a shift in. All right, and last week we pushed to those highs, and we've closed there. Okay, we talked about this a while back, has in it couldn't get to the high and it drifted its way off. Let's go down to the daily. Drifted its way off, but the daily 50 hasn't broken it, all right. And then, as I said, at the end of last week, we pushed higher. Now, part of that, I think, is just cases of, the tariff dilemmas that many nations and blocks are going through. The UK seems to think that we are immune to it, or we're getting the kind of the sort of the best of the deal, and maybe that has been an element of pushing off. And I think also an element of sterling weakness probably contributes towards that as well. But once again, just as I've said about those indexes, the American indexes, is it going to turn? Is it going to turn kind of resistance into support? Okay, is it going to turn it? And that's what we'd need to see. I think, as I said, you've got Bailey speaking, lots of UK data, and Reeves Mansion House speech. All of those have the opportunity to help build a level of support. They also have the opportunity to rug pull completely. So, watch the price action, how that plays out over the next couple of days. Okay, if it's support, that's very bullish. If it breaks, then I think we do go down to that daily 50. So that's my scenario I'm looking at there at the moment. Nikkei's there, DAX as well. Okay. DAX is still holding above those weekly highs, and here we had this great trend, and it was a bit of a head scratcher because actually none of the data coming out of Germany in terms of the economy wasn't that great. It was just being held up by a couple of big stocks. Now, to be fair, the German economic data is starting to turn. It's not it's not shockingly exciting, but it is basically, it's bullish and it's holding up above there. And as I said, a bit like the other indexes, if it holds at these highs, and it holds at these highs through the summer, then I think what happens is it becomes bullish from September and towards the end of the year. And that's the kind of the scenario I'll be looking at the moment. All right, let's have a quick look at gold and silver. We've done Bitcoin. Gold is still holding, all right? It's still holding up. Would you say over those last 2 months that has been terribly bullish? I wouldn't necessarily be excited about it. But last week, that is a bullish momentum pin bar, okay? It is, it is. It was a higher low, a little bit of a higher high. It is pushing its way there. Maybe not as exciting, but if we look at it, it's holding above its daily 20 and daily 50. I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. It's just literally been going sideways for about 2-3 weeks, but it's still holding up above there. All right, still holding up above there. And, maybe it's a case of we're going to see some element of the what goes on with the dollar this week. Right, maybe we'll start to see just a little bit of quieting down as the kind of the summer sort of summer dullness, for want of a better word, starts to really kick in. But yeah, it's still a stand one buy, but I wouldn't necessarily be getting excited about gold at the moment. Whereas silver, as we can see on the weekly chart, silver's continuing to hammer higher. Okay, this has been, it has been quite some move there from, when we looked at from here, closing beneath 30 at the start of the tariff tantrums, that once again, that has just continued to work its way higher there, hasn't it? And on the daily chart, it is literally just every time it keeps breaking these levels and finding support and working its way. It's not as clean or as pretty as gold, but ultimately, it's in an uptrend. So why would you fight it? As I said, the only thing I'd be curious about is that it's parabolic. Okay, so never chase it. All right, never chase it. All right, but watch and see how this particularly plays out. and part of those elements, in terms of Bitcoin, gold, silver, oil, they're also impacted a little bit by more than a little bit by the dollar. So let's have a little look at what the dollar wants to show us in terms of the opportunities. Okay, in terms of what actually we seeing. Okay, so we'll go to my kind of dollar profile. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see what have I got here. Bring it up there. Aussie on the daily, Kiwi on the daily, Euro on the daily, dollar CAD, cable on the daily, dollar yen, dollar Swiss. Okay, and then dollar index. Let's look at the dollar index. That's always the base. When I'm just looking at FX markets, I always start with the dollar index because I want to see what the score is. Okay, and if we look at the weekly chart, yeah, it's in a downtrend. I wouldn't necessarily even call last week a morning star, because normally I like the kind of candle 3 to sort of close at least above kind of 50% of the way of the previous two candles, and I don't think it's done that so far, just eyeballing that. But it has been a bullish week or two, and that's what we're saying here. If I go to the daily chart, we talked about this last week. It has if you look at all the lows, all right, all the lows, it's getting higher lows now. I'll be looking at this as, right, okay, I'm just drawing a counter trend line under that. As I think I said a week or so ago, it needs to look at getting above this low and then getting above the 20. Now, of course, we kind of we did that on Friday, but as I said, we'll need more than that. It wouldn't surprise me if it came down and tested the 20 and the trend line. But if it tests and holds, then, as I said, for me, it has to get above the daily 50 to give me, confidence that we have seen the end of that dollar shortness. Okay, it is all set up for a beautiful bear squeeze, but that price action is a little bit too nice for a proper bear squeeze at the moment, I would suggest. Although that's fine, that's what makes a market. But as you can see, that basically is, we're getting some dollar strength in there right now. That dollar strength may just be coming from people closing their dollar shorts, all right, but nonetheless, that's what we're seeing. And then, of course, that is having an impact across the board. So you're seeing euro against the dollar's weakened this month. Okay, dollar against Canadian dollar has weakened. Okay, Japanese yen has weakened. Pound has weakened. Even Swiss franc, which is top of the pile, that has weakened. Okay, Aussie hasn't, but we're going to look at that in a moment. But Kiwi dollar, okay, has weakened. So July, you have seen dollar strength. All right, is that the end of the downtrend? I can't say that at this moment, but you just trade what you see in front of you, and okay, that's what we see in front of us at this moment. As I said, Aussie dollar's going on there. Okay, so Aussie is strengthening. Okay, off the back of, I think, risk on, and as I said, Canadian data being a little bit better. If we look at this over the last week or so, look at that: Aussie against Japanese yen. That's Aussie strengthening. Aussie against the dollar. Even when the dollar's strengthening, Aussie has strengthened. Okay, pound has weakened against the Aussie. It has also weakened against the euro. Has weakened against the Aussie. Aussie has strengthened against the Canadian. Aussie has, certainly strengthened against the Kiwi dollar, and Aussie has even started to strengthen against the Swiss franc. Okay, and remember, Swiss franc and euro have been the top of the pile of the stand, whereas Aussie has been bottom of the pile. But as I say, when you're at the bottom, the only way is up. When you're at the top, the only way is down. So we are seeing that kind of that Aussie element there. Okay, coming in. So you might want to watch that. And then finally, as always, let us look at sterling. Okay, as I said, a fair bit of sterling data coming out, and also you've got Bailey and Reeves speaking as well. So it has the opportunity to be a rather eventful week. So make sure you're on top of the news flow. Make sure